The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations 2018 states that pollinators are the beginning of a massive food chain. Their abundance and diversity, including bees, butterflies, small birds and bats, maintains biodiversity and ecosystems for all plants and animals while providing food security for the human population. The existence of pollinators is necessary for all life on Earth. As pollinators travel from plant to plant, they are dusted by pollen, moving it to the next flower, resulting in fertilization. This process allows the plant to reproduce and form seeds, berries, fruits, and other plant food. Pollination services are responsible for 75% of agricultural crops worldwide, according to Garibaldi and Eisen 2009. The FAO 2018 agreed that pollinators are responsible for human nutrition with their continued service providing production of quality foods and high yields. In 2014, Klatt, Holsch and Westphal et al. Reported that 3 out of 4 crops, approximately 100 leading food crops across the globe that produce fruits or seeds for humans, depend on pollinators. Pollinators are in danger. Hundreds of pollinator species are on the verge of extinction due to habitat loss, fragmentation, farming techniques, disease, pesticides, and climate change. Their present species extinction rates are 100 to 1,000 times higher than normal due to human activity. 40% of invertebrate pollinator species, including bees and butterflies, are facing extinction reports, John 2018. Bees are affected by anthropogenic climate change and the altered weather patterns it brings. The FAO 2018 discussed the fact that they are emerging at different times to the flowering plants they require as their food source, and this desynchronization is leading to bee deaths. Crops such as mangoes, almonds and cherries bloom over short time periods and require an enormous peak in pollinators. Not only are farmers relying on shipping in pollinators to crop areas, farmers have also had to take on pollinating their own crops, dusting pollen onto flowers with paintbrushes. A study by Boyle, Dalgleish and Pusey 2019 tells of monarch butterfly populations decreasing 90% in 20 years due to the loss of its main caterpillar home in milkweed plants. Most other plant-eating insects also depend on specific types of plants for their survival, and most birds rely on those insects to feed their young. Although insect pollinators are the most dominant for crops globally, there needs to be increased conservation effort for vertebrate pollinators, with some of these species moving closer to extinction each year due to pressures including agricultural growth. John 2018 links a decrease in fruit and seed productions to 16% of pollinating vertebrate like birds and bats also being in danger of massive decline in population levels. The contribution of pollination to agricultural yields globally is greater than any management practice, according to the FAO 2018. The decline in pollinators will impact the production and the cost of producing crops, such as many fruits and vegetables that we depend on for balanced diets that are necessary to maintain human health around the world. The maintenance and continually increasing yields in agricultural crops is also important for food security and income for farmers. The study done by Imbach, Fung and Hanna et al. 2007 suggests that climate change will cause geographic range shifts for pollinators and major crops, with global implications for food security and rural livelihoods. Coffee is just one of the crops that they report will suffer due to climate change because coffee production is dependent on bee pollination. Their results suggest that coffee-suitable areas will be reduced 73 to 88% by 2050 and that the unaffected areas may not be suitable for pollinator survival. Crops dependent on pollinators, including coffee and cocoa, are 5 times more valuable than those that do not require pollination. These crops provide income for farmers. Crops relying on pollination have a monetary value estimated to be between $235 and $577 billion US a year. The majority of pollinators are wild. This includes over 20,000 species of bees, according to FAO 2018 data. A study by Batra in 1995 looked at bee populations as agricultural practice was growing throughout the world. In 1995, Batra said honeybees were not thought to be the best pollinators, but they were the only pollinators used to pollinate crops. The use of other populations was limited. Farmers for centuries had relied on importing colonies of European honeybees to pollinate their crops. Kremen and Williams et al. 2002 discussed the reliance of farmers on managed honeybees. With disease, pesticides and other anthropogenic impacts negatively affecting these colonies, there is hope that there is a possibility of increasing the use of native bee communities. This would require native bee habitats being restored and conserved. Over time, agriculture has changed the focus of the types of crops it grows and has increased the use of pesticides. The study of researchers Britton and Potts 2011 looked at the impacts of insecticides on plant pollinating communities, particularly the disturbance of sociality and floral specialisation life history traits. Azen and Harder 2009 discuss FAO data which shows a rapid increase in agriculture depending on pollination in the last half of the century compared to earlier times. Their research suggests that this increase, along with economic globalisation, could be responsible for stressing the global pollination capacity. Britton, Williams and Kremen et al. 2013 also discussed the increase in pollinator-dependent crops from 1961 to 2006, placing stress on this service vital to human health. Globalisation has facilitated the transmission of pests and diseases over long distances and has resulted in reduced resistance for many pollinator species. Hives infested with the pest varroa mite and the mysterious colony collapse disorder are also impacting on pollinator numbers globally. Australia is home to one of the last remaining semi-healthy bee populations in the world. Honeybees pollinate human food crops worth $4 to $6 billion annually in Australia, reports Bayer and Anderson 2018. They say much of our pollination in Australia is done by native bees, not just European honeybees. This includes crops such as broadbeans, canola, sunflowers and also lucerne, pastures and many fruit trees. Many crops use the free pollination services provided by native bees, but others, such as almonds, use commercial bees. Therefore, any negative impact on the honeybee industry, either through honey production or as pollinators of Australian crops and pastures, has huge implications for Australia's food security. The European Environmental Agency discussed how management and conservation of pollinators is necessary now to allow for the sustainability of food crops into the future. Feeding the rapidly increasing global human population will not be sustainable without the services of pollinators. Increasing good local management practices may increase bee richness, abundance and crop production. This European Environmental Agency report that farmers globally need to consider pollinator abundance, diversity and health by integrating practices that will protect them. Pollinator habitats in both agricultural and urban areas need to be built and maintained. The Food and Agricultural Organisation 2018 discussed how bees can now be considered livestock as the product honey is increasing in commercial value, generating incomes and food security for small-scale producers and forest dwellers in developing countries. Fortunately, urban beekeeping is growing in popularity in cities around the world, and the quality of honey being produced is of a very high standard. The FAO 2018 also report that pollinators are providing forage sources for farm animals, allowing them to adapt to an environment changing with the climate. Management practices on farms, including the provision of good habitats for pollinators, can increase their densities and diversity. After crop harvest, when land is left fallow until the next season, there is growth of herbs and shrubs providing food sources for bees. Zero hunger is one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development looks at nourishing the people and nurturing the planet. Bees and other pollinators are responsible for at least 3/4 of the world's crops. Pollinators help to feed an increasing global population. They facilitate and improve food production, contributing to food security and nutrition while positively impacting the environment, maintaining biodiversity and natural ecosystems that the anthropogenic production system of agriculture depends on. The National Resources Defence Council 2015 report that rising population growth paired with an increased need for agriculture corresponds to a growing need for pollinators like honeybees and their services. We have put a huge amount of pressure on our pollinators by both increasing demand for their services and removing their habitat. Research and collaboration on national and international levels needs to be increased to monitor and implement programs that assess and protect pollinators and their services to the global environment and their ability to sustain the human population into the future. To quote Albert Einstein, if the bee disappeared off the surface of the globe, then man would have only 4 years of life left. No more bees, no more pollination, no more plants, no more animals, no more man. Protecting our pollinators will lead to world food security and improved nutrition for the growing population. Pollinators are feeding the planet.